My CO smirked. Layla, we're downsizing. Clear your desk by tomorrow. I nodded. Of course. He didn't know I already had an offer from his biggest rival. By Monday, his smile vanished as he walked into a meeting and saw me sitting at the head of the table. Layla, we're downsizing. Clear your desk by tomorrow. Silence. The words lingered in the air, heavier than the polished mahogany desk between us. I kept my face unreadable even though my heart pounded in my chest. I had spent 6 years of my life saving this company, turning Damien Caldwell's failures into successes, fighting his battles, fixing his messes. No. He was tossing me aside like I was nothing. Not every battle is fought with fists. Some are won with strategy, patience, and knowing when to make your move. If you love stories of resilience, ambition, and power shifts, make sure to subscribe. Together, we explore the moments that define us. Now let's dive in. Damien's fingers tapped rhythmically against his luxury watch, his expression eerily calm, as if this was just another routine decision. As if I wasn't the reason Caldwell Corporation was standing today. I swallowed the bitter taste of betrayal. You're downsizing? My voice came out steady, controlled. He nodded, completely unbothered. It's a tough market, Layla. You know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. I had been in the trenches when this company was barely keeping its head above water. I had spent countless nights strategizing, negotiating, pulling Caldwell Corporation out of the red. No, we weren't just surviving. We were thriving. And yet, I was the one being cut. My stomach twisted, but I refused to let him see it. I squared my shoulders. And my position? Damien sighed, leaning back in his chair, his smirk returning. That smirk. The one he always wore when he knew he was in control. I'm replacing you with Madeline Pierce. The name hit me like a slap. Madeline. His girlfriend. I should have known. The signs were all there. The longer lunch breaks, the unnecessary meetings, the way he started deferring my decisions to someone who had no experience in corporate strategy. Madeline had never earned this position. But she had the one thing I didn't, Damien's attention. I stood up slowly, adjusting my blazer. Controlled. Calm. Damien was waiting for me to argue, to beg. That I smiled. Understood. For the first time in his pathetic life, Damien looked confused. No hard feelings? He asked, feigning concern. No hard feelings. After everything I had sacrificed for this place? After I had turned this company from a failing disaster into a market leader? I wanted to laugh. Scream. Throw the expensive paperweight on his desk straight through the glass walls. But I wouldn't. Because Damien didn't deserve my anger. He deserved something much worse. I turned, walking out of his office, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. As I moved through the hallways of Caldwell Corporation, I felt the weight of every sacrifice I had made for this place. The late nights. The weekends lost. The relationships I let slip away. I had built teams from scratch, brokered record-breaking deals, saved this company when it was drowning. And this was my reward. A quiet, humiliating exit. As I passed by the glass-walled conference rooms, employees cast quick, uncertain glances at me. Some looked down at their desks. Others gave me sympathetic nods. They had heard. They knew. But none of them spoke up. Because this was Damien Caldwell's empire. And I had just been erased. I reached my office, the space I had practically lived in for years. Everything was still in place. The files I had painstakingly organized, the business plans I had mapped out, the whiteboard filled with strategies that had saved this company. I moved toward my desk, but then I saw it. An email notification on my screen. The subject line? Leadership announcement. New CSO appointment. My breath stilled. They didn't even wait. I clicked it open, scanning the text, my eyes burning with rage. Effective immediately, Madeline Pierce has been appointed as Chief Strategy Officer. We are confident that her vision and leadership will continue to drive Caldwell Corporation forward. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. Madeline had never led anything in her life. She had never made a tough business decision, never built a strategy, never fought for a company's survival. But none of that mattered. Because Damien didn't value competence. He valued control. And I had never been controllable. A soft knock on the door made me look up. Jonathan Hale. The head of finance. One of the few people at Caldwell Corporation I actually respected. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. "This company won't survive without you," he said, his voice low. I forced a small, bitter smile. "I know." He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "You built this place, Layla. You think Damien doesn't know that? He's making a mistake." I shook my head. Damien knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't care about what was best for the company. He cared about control. "I tried to talk to him," Jonathan continued. "Tried to make him see reason." I let out a humorless laugh. "And how did that go?" Jonathan's lips pressed into a thin line. "He's going to regret this." I nodded, but I already knew. Because this company's downfall had already begun. I turned back to my desk. The gold nameplate still read, "Layla Warren, Chief Strategy Officer." Tomorrow it would say, "Madeline Pierce, Damien's plaything." I clenched my jaw, inhaling sharply. Oh, this wouldn't be my ending. This wouldn't be my story. I had been the backbone of this company. The one who held it together, fixed its failures, made it a leader in the market. Damien thought I was replaceable. He was about to learn just how wrong he was. Because without me, Caldwell Corporation would burn. And I wouldn't have to lift a finger to watch it happen. I stepped out of the Caldwell Corporation building, the cold night air hitting my face like a slap. I should have felt something, anger, sadness, relief, anything. But right now there was only a hollow space inside my chest, one I wasn't ready to acknowledge. I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder, my grip tightening around the handle of the small box carrying the last remnants of my career. 6 years of my life. Reduced to a few office supplies and a framed certificate. How poetic. The streets were unusually quiet, the city lights flickering against the dark sky. I needed a destination, somewhere to sit, to process, to think. But where? Not home. That would make it feel too real. Not a friend's place. I wasn't ready for sympathy. And then, as if on instinct, my feet started moving, carrying me down the familiar sidewalks of downtown. I hadn't been walking for more than 5 minutes when a voice called out from behind me. "Layla." I froze, my jaw clenching before I even turned around. Madeline. Of course it had to be her. I turned slowly, masking the storm brewing inside me, only to find her standing there in a form-fitting trench coat, her perfectly styled hair swaying in the light breeze. She looked completely at ease, like a queen stepping out of her castle, while I stood there with a box full of my career's ashes. Her lips curled into a practiced, innocent smile. "I just wanted to check in on you." I arched a brow, forcing myself to remain calm. "Check in?" "Yes," she said sweetly, stepping closer. "I know how much this job meant to you." I nearly laughed. The audacity. She knew exactly what she was doing. I met her gaze, keeping my expression unreadable. "That's kind of you, Madeline." She tilted her head. "No hard feelings, right?" No hard feelings. I had rebuilt this company from the ground up. Sacrificed my personal life. Fought battles that weren't mine to fight. Only to be discarded for her. For someone who had never earned anything she had. I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. "Of course not." Madeline studied me for a second, searching for cracks in my composure. When she found none, her eyes glinted with amusement. She thrived on the power shift. She wanted me to break. Too bad for her. I had already broken once. It wasn't happening again. "Good," she said, giving a small nod. "Then I guess I'll see you around." I didn't respond. I just turned and walked away, my heart pounding with barely contained fury. Let her have this moment. As soon I would have mine. I found myself walking toward a small bookstore cafe, tucked into a quiet street corner. It was one of my favorite places. One I used to visit when I needed an escape. Back when Caldwell Corporation was still my second home, not the battlefield it had become. The bell chimed softly as I stepped inside, the scent of brewed coffee and aged paper wrapping around me like a familiar embrace. A few late-night customers sat tucked in corners, absorbed in their books. The world felt slower here, distant from the corporate chaos I had just left behind. I walked to the counter and ordered a black coffee, something strong enough to pull me out of my thoughts. As I waited, I noticed an old man sitting by the window, hunched over a newspaper. His hands were slightly shaking, his glasses perched at the edge of his nose as he underlined something with a pen. I don't know why, but he felt familiar. When the barista handed me my coffee, I found myself moving toward his table. "Excuse me," I said, my voice softer than I expected. "Do you mind if I sit here?" The man looked up, his eyes sharp but kind. After a brief hesitation, he nodded. I sat down across from him, wrapping my fingers around the warmth of my cup. "You look troubled," he said after a moment. I exhaled, letting out a short, humorless chuckle. "It's been a long day." He gave a knowing nod, then slid the newspaper across the table. "Ever read the business section?" I glanced down. The headlines were about corporate takeovers, rising stocks, and CEO scandals. A world I had once thrived in. A world that had just spit me out. I admitted. "Now I'm not so sure." The man studied me for a moment before setting his pen down. "You remind me of my daughter. She worked herself to the bone for a company that never saw her worth." I looked up, something heavy settling in my chest. "What happened to her?" I asked. A small, sad smile touched his lips. "She walked away. Started something of her own." I swallowed, my fingers tightening around my cup. Walked away. The words settled in my mind, echoing in places I hadn't allowed myself to acknowledge yet. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't need to fight to prove my worth to people who never valued me in the first place. Maybe it was time to build something of my own. I left the cafe feeling lighter, though the weight of betrayal still clung to me like a second skin. As I walked back toward my apartment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and hesitated. A message from Jonathan Hale. "Jonathan, if you ever need to talk, I'm here. You didn't deserve this." I stared at the message for a long moment. Jonathan had always been one of the few good ones. He had seen what was coming. He had warned Damien. And Damien had ignored him. I typed out a response. "Thanks, Jonathan. I'll be okay." I wasn't sure if that was true. But I would be. Eventually. As I slid my phone back into my pocket, I turned one last time toward the city skyline. Caldwell Corporation stood tall in the distance, a monument to everything I had built. But it wasn't mine anymore. Maybe that was a good thing. I stood at the edge of my apartment balcony, staring at the city skyline. Caldwell Corporation loomed in the distance, its glass windows reflecting the city lights like a fortress standing against the dark. It had been 3 days since I walked out of that building, and yet, it still felt like a phantom limb, something I could feel even though it was no longer mine. I should have been grieving. Instead, I was waiting. Waiting for the first crack to appear. Because if there was one thing I knew for sure, it was that Caldwell Corporation wouldn't survive without me. Damien thought he had made a business decision when he replaced me with Madeline. He had, in reality, made a mistake that was about to cost him everything. A vibration from my phone pulled me out of my thoughts. I reached for it, expecting a message from Jonathan. But it wasn't from Jonathan. It was from an unknown number. "Unknown. You're not the only one leaving." My pulse quickened. I typed back quickly. "Who is this?" The response came almost instantly. "Unknown. Someone who believes in you." Before I could reply, another message appeared. "Unknown. Check your email." I hesitated, but curiosity pushed me forward. I opened my laptop and logged into my email. My inbox was flooded with Caldwell Corporation internal resignations. My breath hitched. It wasn't one or two people. It was dozens. Finance, marketing, operations, even a few from the legal team. Half the people I had worked alongside for years were leaving. And suddenly I knew. Damien had thought he was getting rid of me. Instead, he had set off a mass exodus. I refreshed the screen, the number of resignation emails growing by the minute. The people leaving weren't just random employees. They were some of Caldwell Corp's top executives, the brains behind its success. The same people Damien had ignored. The same people he had undervalued. Well, they were walking away. And not just anywhere. They were walking straight to me. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. I hesitated for half a second before answering. "Who is this?" A deep voice responded. "Richard Langley. I hear you've been busy." My fingers tightened around my phone. Titan Industries. Damien's biggest competitor. The same man who had tried to hire me months ago. No. He wanted to talk. "How did you get my number?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Langley chuckled. "People talk, Layla. And right now they're all talking about you." I said nothing. I wasn't about to play into whatever game he was setting up. "You made an impression at Caldwell Corporation," Langley continued. "And it seems you've left with more than just experience. People are following you, Layla. Important people. I didn't respond because he wasn't wrong. And we both knew what he was about to offer. You're a smart woman, Langley said. You know where this is headed. I want you at Titan Industries. Full executive power. Build something with us. I closed my eyes for a brief second. I had been loyal to Caldwell Corporation for 6 years. I had built everything. And Damien had thrown me away. No. He was about to watch me take everything he once had. I exhaled. I'm listening. By the time the call ended, the deal was set. I wasn't just joining Titan Industries. I was leading a new initiative. One that would specifically target Caldwell Corporation as market share. Damien had played me like a disposable piece on a chessboard. No. I was flipping the entire board. But before I could strike, I needed to understand what was left of Caldwell Corp. I reached for my phone and dialed Jonathan. He answered on the first ring. Tell me you've seen the resignations. I have, I said. And I need to know what else is happening. Jonathan sighed. Layla, it's worse than you think. Damien is losing his grip. Investors are panicking. Clients are questioning whether the company can hold up. And with all these resignations, it's turning into a disaster. I smiled. Good. Jonathan hesitated. Layla, what are you planning? I didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't just about business. This was personal. And I wasn't done yet. 2 days later, I sat in the boardroom of Titan Industries, overlooking the city skyline. Across from me sat some of Caldwell Corp's former executives, people who had walked out after my firing. These weren't just employees. These were the architects of Caldwell Corp's success. No, they were mine. I leaned forward, hands clasped together. We're going to do this carefully. No mistakes. No rushed moves. The room was silent. Then one of the former marketing heads spoke. What's the plan? I looked around the table, meeting each of their gazes. Then I smiled. The plan is simple, I said. We dismantle Caldwell Corporation from the inside out. A silence settled over the boardroom. The kind that stretched, thick with expectation and the weight of decisions that couldn't be undone. I leaned back in my chair, fingers pressed together, scanning the faces of the executives who had followed me from Caldwell Corporation to Titan Industries. Some were eager, their eyes burning with the same quiet vengeance that fueled me. Others looked wary, understanding the gravity of what we were about to do. I didn't blame them. We weren't just competing with Caldwell Corp. We were tearing it apart, piece by piece, client by client, dollar by dollar. And by the time we were done, Damien Caldwell wouldn't have a company left to run. I let the silence linger a second longer, then spoke. We start slow. We don't attack head-on. We let the cracks that are already forming do the work for us. The former head of finance, Malcolm Carter, frowned. We already know Caldwell Corporation is in free fall, but they're not dead yet. Damien is going to fight. I smiled. Of course he is. That's why we don't go for him directly. We go for the foundation. The clients, Jonathan said, nodding in understanding. I met his gaze. Exactly. Damien had always believed the company revolved around him. What he never realized was that the real power lay in the people who trusted us, the clients who invested in our leadership. And now they had a choice to make. Stay with a sinking ship or join the woman who had built it in the first place. By the next morning, my team had a list of Caldwell Corp's top 15 clients. I knew each one by name, not because I had memorized them for business reasons, but because I had built those relationships myself. I had spent years understanding their industries, anticipating their needs, and making sure they trusted Caldwell Corporation with their money. And now I was about to take that trust with me. I set up 5 meetings in the next 3 days, all with long-standing clients who had already been calling with concerns about the instability at Caldwell Corp. I didn't have to convince them to leave. I just had to show them the reality of where things were headed. I arrived at the first meeting early, sitting at the head of a sleek conference table inside Titan Industries' private suite. Across from me sat David Hawthorne, CEO of a high-profile tech firm. He had been one of Caldwell Corp's biggest investors for 3 years. And from the way he looked at me now, I already knew he was considering pulling out. Layla, he greeted, his expression serious. I assume you know why I agreed to this meeting. I nodded, keeping my tone even. Because you're worried. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. I invested in Caldwell Corporation because I trusted you. And now you're not there. That tells me I made a mistake. I leaned forward slightly. Then let me ask you something, David. If I was never part of the picture, would you still trust Damien Caldwell to run your investment? A beat of silence. Then he sighed. That's what I thought, I said, my voice softer now. You don't have to be tied to a company just because of history. What you need is stability. And I can give you that. His fingers drummed against the table. I could tell he was already convinced, he just needed the final push. So I gave it to him. Titan Industries is prepared to offer you better terms, faster returns, and leadership you can rely on. I paused, letting my words sink in. That last part is the most important, isn't it? Another beat of silence. Then David nodded. The first domino had fallen. 2 days later the news broke. David Hawthorne had officially moved his investments from Caldwell Corporation to Titan Industries. And Damien was spiraling. I knew it before anyone else did, because Jonathan sent me a message. Jonathan, you've got his attention. He's scrambling. I smirked, typing back. Good. But I also knew this was only the beginning. Damien wouldn't go down quietly. He never did. And I was right. Because that same afternoon, my assistant walked into my office with a tight expression. Damien Caldwell just called, she said, hesitating. He wants to meet with you. I didn't react. Not at first. I had expected this. Still, I took my time setting down my pen, glancing up. Did he sound nervous? She nodded. Very. I exhaled, leaning back in my chair. Damien was losing control. And now he wanted to talk. I glanced at the city skyline, at the tower that still bore his name. The war had just begun. And I wasn't done yet. I met Damien at a high-end restaurant, the kind that only catered to people who thought they were invincible. He was already seated when I arrived, a drink in front of him. The moment he saw me, his jaw clenched. I smirked. Good. He was feeling it. Layla, he said, his tone forced. I wasn't sure if you'd come. I slid into the seat across from him, taking my time. I was curious. He studied me, his expression unreadable. You're making a mistake. I tilted my head. Funny. I was about to say the same to you. His fingers curled around his glass. You don't have to do this. I let out a small laugh. Do what, Damien? Be successful? You already made sure I wasn't welcome at Caldwell Corporation. I'm just doing what you taught me. His eyes darkened. You're trying to destroy me. I didn't respond immediately. Then I leaned forward, my voice softer now. I don't have to destroy you, Damien, I said. You're doing it all on your own. His expression flickered just for a second. Then he exhaled, his mask slipping back into place. This isn't over. I smiled. No, I agreed. It's not. And with that I stood, leaving him sitting alone in the restaurant that once symbolized his power. No. He was the one fighting to stay afloat. And I was just getting started. I walked out of the restaurant, my heels clicking against the polished marble floor, my posture straight, my head held high. I had left Damien exactly where he belonged, on the defensive. The moment I stepped outside, the night air wrapped around me, crisp and cool. But even with the fresh air, I could still feel the weight of the confrontation sitting heavy in my chest. Damien had been rattled. That alone should have felt like a victory. But something about the way he had looked at me, the way his words had lingered. This isn't over. There had been a warning buried in his tone. And if there was one thing I knew about Damien Caldwell, it was that he didn't take losing lightly. I pulled my phone out of my bag, unlocking it with a swipe. A new message popped up on my screen. Jonathan, something's off. I think he's planning something. I stared at the words for a long moment, my gut twisting. I had expected fights, resistance, corporate maneuvering, but this message? This felt different. I tapped out a response. Me, what kind of something? Pause. Then another message came through. Jonathan, I don't know yet. But whatever it is, be careful. I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening around my phone. Damien wasn't just fighting to keep his company afloat. He was planning his counterattack. The first sign of trouble came the next morning. I was sitting in my office at Titan Industries, reviewing the latest contracts from the clients we had pulled away from Caldwell Corporation when my assistant Rachel knocked on my door. Layla, she said, her voice unusually tense. You need to see this. I glanced up. What is it? She hesitated before stepping forward. placing a stack of printed articles onto my desk. My stomach dropped the second I saw the headlines. Layla Warren faces allegations of corporate espionage. Titan Industries under fire. Did they steal trade secrets from Caldwell Corp? I picked up one of the articles, scanning the words. According to inside sources, former Caldwell Corporation executive Layla Warren has been accused of using confidential company information to manipulate and lure clients away from her former employer. I didn't have to read further to know exactly who the inside source was. Damien. The snake had gone to the press. I set the paper down slowly, my hands steady, but my blood boiling underneath. Rachel shifted uncomfortably. I already spoke to our legal team. We can issue a statement. No, I cut in, shaking my head. That's exactly what he wants. She frowned. What do you mean? I leaned back, exhaling sharply. If we rush to defend ourselves, we look guilty. Damien is testing us, he wants us to panic. Rachel nodded slowly, but concern still flickered in her eyes. So what do we do? I picked up my phone and dialed Jonathan. He answered on the first ring. I saw it. Of course he had. Tell me, I said, my voice low. Did he plant anything inside Caldwell Corporation to make it look real? Pause. Then Jonathan sighed. He's been keeping old, outdated files with your name still attached to them. Nothing actually illegal, but enough to create doubt. I clenched my jaw. So this wasn't just a PR hit. This was a carefully planted lie, wrapped in just enough truth to make people question me. Damien was good. But he had made one mistake. He had forgotten who he was up against. I spent the next few hours reading, watching, analyzing. The headlines were calculated, released in carefully spaced intervals, spreading like wildfire. If I wasn't careful, this could spiral into something irreparable. But I had one advantage Damien didn't. I didn't have to lie to make my case. I pulled up an email, one that had been buried in my inbox for months. A resignation letter. My resignation letter. I had kept a copy of it for my own records, signed and time-stamped before my exit from Caldwell Corp. And attached to that email, a formal clearance document from Caldwell's own legal department, confirming that I had left without taking anything belonging to the company. In other words, Damien's evidence was a complete fabrication. I called Rachel back into my office. Schedule a press conference, I said. Her eyes widened. You want to go public with this? I smiled. Absolutely. By evening, the press room at Titan Industries was filled with reporters, cameras flashing, microphones set up across the podium. I stepped up, my expression calm, unshaken. I could feel the weight of the accusations in the air, but I didn't let them get to me. Good evening, I said, my voice steady. I want to address the allegations made against me and Titan Industries. I reached into my folder and held up the clearance document from Caldwell Corporation's legal team. This document, I continued, is proof that when I left Caldwell Corporation, I did so with complete transparency. The cameras flashed. I placed another document on the podium. And this, I said, is a copy of my official resignation letter, signed months before these accusations ever surfaced. A murmur ran through the room. I let them absorb it for a second before delivering the final blow. The claims against me are not only false, but they were strategically planted by an individual who stands to gain from my downfall. I looked directly into the cameras, making sure my next words hit exactly where they needed to. I encouraged Damien Caldwell to come forward with real evidence, if he has any. I paused, my smile razor-sharp. Because I know for a fact that he doesn't. A silence stretched across the room. And just like that, the narrative flipped. The next morning, Damien didn't respond. No official statements. No press appearances. Because he couldn't. He had tried to trap me. Instead, he had walked right into my trap. Rachel walked into my office with a grin. Well, the internet is having a field day. I smirked. Good. I glanced at my phone. No new calls. No more moves from Damien. For now. I knew better than to think this was over. But today I had one. And I was ready for whatever came next. The silence from Damien was deafening. For 2 days he hadn't responded, not to the press, not to the public, and certainly not to me. I knew exactly what that meant. He was trapped. Because if he spoke up now, he would have to produce evidence. Evidence that didn't exist. And if he stayed silent, The world would see him for what he really was. A coward. A liar. A desperate man clinging to the last remnants of his empire. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Anticipation. Because this wasn't just about winning. This was about watching the fall. And I wasn't going to look away. I was sitting in my office when my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting a message from Rachel or Jonathan. Instead, the name on the screen made my lips curl into a knowing smile. David Hawthorne. The investor who had been one of Caldwell Corp's biggest backers. I answered. David, I greeted smoothly. To what do I owe the pleasure? There was a long pause before he sighed. I'm pulling out of Caldwell Corporation completely. I leaned back in my chair. And I'm moving the remainder of my investments to Titan Industries. I let the silence hang between us for a second before responding. You made the right choice. A humorless chuckle from his end. I should have done it sooner. I tapped my fingers against the desk. What was the final push? Another pause. Then his voice dropped lower. I just got word from a source inside Caldwell Corporation. He hesitated. It's worse than anyone knows. I straightened slightly. How bad? Bad enough that Damien won't be able to recover. My grip on the phone tightened. For months I had known Caldwell Corporation was unraveling. But this was something else. Damien wasn't just losing. He was crumbling. And for the first time in my life I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. The next morning the headlines were brutal. Caldwell Corporation faces investor exodus. Stocks drop overnight. Damien Caldwell under pressure as clients flee. Former executives speak out. The company is falling apart. I scrolled through the articles, sipping my coffee, my expression impassive. This wasn't an attack from me. This was Damien's own doing. Every bad decision. Every reckless move. Every blind assumption that he could run a company without the people who built it. It had finally caught up to him. Jonathan called before noon. I answered with a smirk already forming. Tell me, I said, how's the mood at Caldwell Corporation today? He exhaled sharply. You don't even want to know. Try me. There was a pause. Then his voice lowered. Layla. The board is meeting. My smirk faded. Emergency? I asked. Yeah. Jonathan hesitated. And Damien wasn't invited. I straightened. Oh well. The moment I had been waiting for had arrived sooner than expected. The board had finally realized what everyone else already knew. Damien Caldwell was a liability. And they were ready to cut him loose. By evening the official announcement came. Damien Caldwell had been removed as CEO of Caldwell Corp. It was over. Everything he had taken from me. Everything he had thought he could control. Gone. I sat in my office watching the news broadcast, the anchor's voice smooth and professional as she read the statement. In a shocking turn of events, the Caldwell Corporation Board of Directors has announced the immediate removal of CEO Damien Caldwell, following a series of financial setbacks and loss of investor confidence. This decision comes after months of internal conflict and declining performance. The camera cut to a stock image of Damien, his once confident smirk frozen in time. But now there was no power behind it. No arrogance. No control. Because he had none left. I set my coffee down, exhaling slowly. I had thought this moment would feel like revenge. Like victory. But in reality, it just felt like justice. Because Damien had never been my enemy. He had been his own. The phone rang late that night. I didn't have to check the screen to know who it was. I let it ring 3 times before I picked up. Silence. Then a voice I knew too well. You won. I leaned back in my chair. I know. Another long silence. Then Damien let out a slow, bitter laugh. You planned this from the start, didn't you? I smiled faintly. No, Damien. You did. He exhaled, and for the first time, there was no fight left in him. Nothing but defeat. Do you feel better? He asked. I thought about that for a second. Then I answered honestly. I feel free. And with that I ended the call. The next morning I did something I hadn't done in years. I took a walk through the city. No meetings. No deadlines. No strategies running through my mind. Just me. For 6 years I had fought for a company that was never mine to begin with. For 6 years I had been a soldier in someone else's war. Now I was finally free. I reached a small cafe and stepped inside, ordering a black coffee. As I waited, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see a woman carrying the weight of someone else's mistakes. I saw Layla Warren. And that was enough. Because the real power wasn't in revenge. It was in knowing when to walk away.